Hey everyone, what's up? Steve here, and welcome to another episode of Films Unseen, the series in which we dive into the world of underrated films. Each episode covers one film that I personally believe did not get the audience attention that it deserved, exploring why it didn't get that audience attention and why I thought it deserved audience attention. The film we're going to explore today falls into a genre that almost everybody is familiar with: the teen drama. More so the films that explore the aimlessness of youth and the confusion that comes with growing up. It's a genre that has admittedly produced a very wide array of mediocre and sometimes very bad films, but there are also some very good ones, and some of those very good ones are very well known. One of the most popular that almost everybody remembers is the film The Breakfast Club. Many people, including myself, think of The Breakfast Club as the quintessential teen film. The film that very honestly explores what teens think and what they go through. And it explores something that a lot of other teen films explore as well, which is the idea of teens wanting to rebel against authority. And the theme of teen angst and rebellion is one that can be very hit or miss. It's something that can make or break a film, depending on how well it's portrayed. Now, the film I want to talk about today is from the late 70s, and it falls into that category of the films that actually do it pretty well. But with that being said, it didn't really get a very big audience, and it has developed a little bit of a cult following over the years, but it's still not a very well-known film. I've only met a few people who know about it. The film I'm talking about in particular is the 1979 drama Over the Edge. The film takes place in the small planned community of New Granada, a suburban sprawl that's filled with a bunch of townhomes, and where the adults have been so wrapped up in their own problems that they've basically ignored their kids' problems, and therefore left nothing for the kids to do. With nothing left to do other than wander around aimlessly, the kids find solace in drugs, partying, and vandalism. Michael Kramer plays the main character of Carl, a young kid who's really not that bad, but ends up falling in with the crowd of Richie, a young thug played by a very young Matt Dillon. Carl, Richie, and other kids that they hang around with are constantly harassed by Sergeant Doberman, played very well by Harry Northup. And this all comes to a head, in which everything falls apart and things start to explode. Now, this is a lower budget movie, and honestly sometimes it verges on the edge of exploitation films, but it's very much helped by a very capable cast. Much of the cast, particularly a lot of the younger actors, were not very experienced actors, but they all do a pretty good job. Michael Kramer is very good in the lead role of Carl, as is Matt Dillon in his first role as Richie. And the other supporting characters do pretty well as well, for the most part. And I personally think this has a lot to do with the very great and fine-tuned direction by Jonathan Kaplan. Jonathan Kaplan knows how to set a scene to build up to emotion, and he knows how to elicit great performances by actors who really hadn't done anything before. But it's not just the kids who do a good job. All of the adults in the film do a pretty good job as well. I really have to give kudos to Andy Romano, who plays Carl's father. He does a very terrific job of portraying somebody who has his own concerns, but at the same time really does care about his kid, but often doesn't know how to express that, and when his kid acts out against him, he really doesn't know how to react. And Andy Romano's performance in the film really points me in the direction of another thing that I really liked about the film, which is that, for the most part, with a few exceptions, and those exceptions are kind of critical to the story in some ways, for the most part, the adults in the film are not mindless authoritarian characters who just want the kids to do whatever the hell they want. When it comes to Carl's parents in particular, you can tell they really care about their kid. They're not trying to just mindlessly get him to do whatever they want him to do. They want him to lead a good and happy life, and they see him heading off in directions that they don't want him to head down. So you can really understand why they do some of the things they do. And there are some adults in the film that are kind of mindless authoritarians, particularly Sergeant Doberman, to an extent. I think there is a little bit of a layer to his character that I think could have been explored a little more, but the characters in the film who are kind of on the mindless authoritarian side kind of show what has happened with the kids. The kids have basically been given nothing to do, and they've really just been able to turn to vandalism and doing things that they really shouldn't be doing at such a young age, or at all. And the adults that come off as mindless authoritarians are just honestly pissed off about it. And they're also pissed off that their parents aren't doing anything about it. There's a great conversation scene toward the end of the film, and I don't really want to give away what happens in the end of the film, although you can very easily figure it out. But there's a conversation that happens just between a few of the adults in the town. And one of them is Carl's father, who really raises the question of what's going on with the kids. There's another character who actually does have one-on-ones with the kids all the time, and he sees what these kids are going through, and he basically just throws it back in his face. And there are a lot of moments like this in the film that are very perceptive and very fine-tuned, and I really liked that about the movie. But it makes me wonder how many of these scenes weren't scripted and how much improvisation there was, because as I mentioned before, a lot of the dialogue between the kids doesn't feel scripted. And there are a few moments where it kind of veers on the edge of being an exploitation film, because there are also some very small unscripted moments where it's kind of going more for shock value. There's one scene in particular that takes place at a party where this kid has an empty beer can and he just tears into it with his teeth and spits it out. And I'm kind of wondering whether or not that was scripted. It probably wasn't, because who would write that into a movie script and expect a kid to do it? But there's this really odd naturalistic feel to the entire film. Well, almost the entire film. I'll get to the part that doesn't feel so naturalistic in a minute. But the other thing that I really liked about the film, the amazing soundtrack and the amazing score. The underlying score by Kaplan is amazing. I can only imagine, because I never saw this in a theater, I can only imagine what it would sound like in a theater setting. And a lot of the other parts of the soundtrack are rock songs, a lot of rock songs that I like in particular. There are a lot of songs by Cheap Trick on the soundtrack, and one of the things that I really liked about the film is how it opened with a few Cheap Trick songs that really set the tone for the rest of the movie. Now, as I mentioned before, I said naturalistic for the most part. There's stuff that happens toward the end of the film that I would say isn't on the naturalistic side, and it actually tends to go more toward the unbelievable. And I was honestly kind of laughing at some of the decisions that were made in the film toward the end. With that being said, though, it didn't ruin the rest of the movie. And the very end, like the last scene, is actually really good, and it makes up for it. Now, with all that being said, one has to wonder, why didn't this film get very much attention? It's actually pretty straightforward. This movie was completed in 1979, and it's about teen vandals and teen angst, and one could kind of classify it as a gang movie. With that being said, there were other gang movies, such as The Wanderers and The Warriors, that were released in 1979 as well, and there were riots that broke out between rival gangs and violent criminals in theaters when those movies were showing. And it caused a lot of uproar, it caused a lot of movies to be pulled from theaters, and it basically scared the producers away from releasing the film in theaters. So the film was basically shelved until it got a very limited theatrical release in 1981. And while the reception of the film was positive when it was finally released, still a lot of people didn't see it. And another thing that really did the movie in was that when it was actually released in theaters and when it got TV spots, those trailers that they showed for the film as TV spots were examples of really horrible marketing. I've seen a couple of the TV spots for the film, and they don't give you any indication that this is a movie about rebellious teens, or teen angst, or a teen drama. It actually features pictures of kids with glowing eyes, and it makes it almost look like something like Village of the Damned. And that's not what the movie was at all, and it made it look stupid. And I would say that that probably stopped a lot of people from going to see it. But yeah, you can really chalk up the obscurity of this film to really bad timing of when it was made and when it was released, and really bad marketing behind its release. Now, this is not a film that everyone will like. A lot of people think that it promotes anarchy, and while it does kind of veer toward the edge of promoting anarchy, I don't think it's trying to promote anarchy. It's rather one of those films that basically just shows what can happen when you have a large population of people who are just sick and tired of everything. And that's not really why I like the movie. The reason why I really like the movie is all the stuff that I mentioned before. Very good acting, very well shot, and the naturalistic feel to it. Alright guys, so there's another movie for you guys to check out if you can ever get your hands on it. And for those of you who don't know, I mentioned before that I launched a Twitter page. If you'd like to follow me, you can follow me at FilmFanSteve. And if you like this video and want to stay tuned for more stuff, feel free to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That's all I have to say for tonight, guys. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and have a good night.